Evening. Jennifer Taylor is the eldest of Mertha Fulkerson's nieces and nephews. She grew up in Highland Park, Illinois, and spent every Christmas with Aunt Mertha when she came home for the holidays. Her family vacationed in Ellison Bay every summer to spend time with Mertha at the clearing. Since she has been a full-time resident in Door County since 2017 and is currently the accountant for the Ridges Sanctuary. Jennifer sees this as her final and most fulfilling role, where she continues the mission that Mertha and Emma Toft began by creating the Ridges and the clearing to preserve and promote nature's wonder. Tonight, Jennifer will share stories and pictures of Mertha's life, apart from her enduring devotion to Jensen and the clearing. Please join me in welcoming our special guest speaker for this evening, Jennifer Taylor.
Look at me. You'd think I was a professional, but this is, how is this? I am not a professional, so this is a little weird. Maybe I'll relax into it. Good evening. Thank you, Jan. That was lovely. And thank you, Cheryl, for coming up with this idea and setting it up. And it's really an opportunity. I'm quite excited to be sharing with you more about my great Aunt Mertha Fulkerson. I'm thrilled for a few reasons. One, she is the most famous person in our family. She was written up in the Congressional Record. Two, she instilled in me a belief. She instilled in me the belief that strong women can do hard things. And this is Mertha with Emma Toft. Three, she is responsible, in case you know, she is responsible for many other family members living in Door County, past and present, who are represented in this row right here. And fourth, mostly, she fought and literally gave her heart and soul to preserve Jensen's dream and the clearing for time and eternity. My goal with this talk is to tell you more about Mertha's life. There's very little that's written about her other than she came from Indiana, and that's pretty much all anybody will say. But obviously the story is much more interesting than just that. This is Mertha when she graduated from high school. Shortly after she graduated, we have a wonderful story from my grandma Grace about how she came to be working for Aunt Mertha. So already I'm way off my script. And that's okay. Around the time that Miss Fulkerson, they always called each other Miss Fulkerson and Mr. Jensen, first met Jensen and Wilmette, she was working as a secretary for a real estate man. She did not like the job very well, as she did not like the man. I got the impression, this is Grandma talking, I got the impression from what I was told that he had a way of twisting words around in a pretty sneaky fashion. So dissatisfied with this job, Miss Fulkerson went to talk to a friend of hers who worked in a paper office and told her that she was looking for a new position and would appreciate some help in finding one. Very shortly after Miss Fulkerson had come to her for help, this friend met Mr. Jensen, who told her he wanted a new secretary right away, and that if she could find him one, he would buy her a new hat. With that in mind, this friend got back to Miss Fulkerson immediately and said she had a job for her, but she had to start at it right away. Miss Fulkerson hurriedly went to quit her job with the real estate man and went to keep an appointment with Mr. Jensen at 5 o'clock. When she met him, he told her he had to go away to Maine, but then showed her a stack of mail which was unopened and unanswered, which he expected her to take care of while he was gone. When she protested that she wouldn't have an idea how to answer their questions, Mr. Jensen assured her that the boys in the next room could help her out. And these were his interns and his architect workers. After that was settled, he kept her there for another couple of hours, telling her all about this place that he had up in Ellison Bay, Wisconsin, until she finally had to go, being late for family dinner. When they questioned her at home as why she was late, she surprised them all by announcing she had a new job. She was 20 years old at the time. The next morning, she went into the office for her first day of work and had to somehow deal with that stack of mail. She went to talk to the boys in the next room about the answers they should give to the people writing to Mr. Jensen, and they laughed her off, assuring her that the people who wrote Jensen wanted to hear from Jensen and not from them or her. She went back into her office a little taken aback, and then she figured out how to deal with it. She wrote to all the people who had written to him, saying that Mr. Jensen had been called away unexpectedly to Maine, but that he would get an answer to them as soon as he returned. She then stashed the stack away in her desk drawer, and after Mr. Jensen returned, she would add 3 or 4 letters from the stack into his morning mail each day until they were taken care of. As they worked together, it became clear that Miss Fulkerson and Mr. Jensen had a very complimentary relationship. Mrs. Richardson added that, of course, Grandma added to the person she was talking to, that included the very fact that they were both lousy businessmen. As proof of that, she offered, who else would dream of trying to start something like the clearing on $1,000? Grandma, she went on to say how Jensen had so many challenges, people backed out of funding, and there's just a lot of difficulties getting it going. And with all those disappointments, Mertha agreed. She had already been working for him for 10 years at this point. Mertha agreed to come up to help Mr. Jensen for 1 year. And you'll read this everywhere that you read about Mertha. It's well known. She said 1 year. What we might not know, which is what Grandma knew, was that he bribed her, saying that he would build her a weaving room if she stayed, and she did. One day, he and Aunt Mertha took a trip over to Washington Island. Then they had students at the clearing, and so they went over to Washington Island to look around at it. Back at the clearing, they had left these students, who Miss Fulkerson cared very much to attend to. They missed the ferry off the island. And Miss Fulkerson began to worry a great deal about the students and insisted she had to get back to them. Finally, she made such a fuss that the captain of the ferry agreed to make a special trip over to the mainland for them. As the two of them drove back to the clearing from Gills Rock Harbor, Mr. Jensen turned to her and said simply, "Why, I didn't know you had hysterics." Grandma said of Mr. Jensen, he was a giant, but he was a man. So I'm going to back up a little bit. Let's see, where are we at, Casey, with our I'm not even sure where we are. Those are her folks. I want to go, and there's Grandma and Alice, Mertha's sisters. I'm going to tell you the story about the root cellar if you haven't heard that one. So Dad, he first went up to the clearing in 1933. He was 8 years old, and he was devoted to Aunt Mertha. From that time on, he never stopped going up to the clearing to see her. And one day when he was home from the war, it was the last project that Jens was doing. He wanted to, there's Dad, he wanted to build a root cellar. And boy, I really messed this up. But it's okay, I know this stuff by heart anyway. But he couldn't lift the rocks, and so he asked Dad to help him. Here's Jens, just a few years before he was 87. Maybe I lost the page, oh well. I know the story. So, my dad was called, my Aunt Mertha called my dad Nunu, and that was because he was a junior, but his younger sister, Ellis, couldn't say junior, so she called him Nunu, and Aunt Mertha picked that up, and she always called him Nunu, and then Jens called him Nunu too. So Jens would say to Dad, and this story was actually written in the Door County Living magazine in 2010. Dad met and gave this interview. So what she wrote was, picture an 87-year-old man swinging a pickaxe to carve a root cellar on the grounds of the clearing. Jens found the perfect location and started, but he could not lift anything. The root cellar was the last project that he worked on before his death in 1951. He laid the first few courses of stones and discovered that the stones were too heavy, so he asked Wilson Nunu to help. So Dad was home from World War II at the time, and he was happy to lend a hand. I think you can go one more here. There's Dad and Aunt Mertha. They were very playful. They were very, very, very much affectionate with each other. They really loved each other. So Dad said, Mr. Jensen would point to a rock, saying that might fit, and I'd put it up there. He'd take a look, shake his head, and say, no, 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 try that one. And he pointed to a different one. Dad said, it took a while. Richardson said he and Jensen worked together and built the wall to head height before the younger man had to return home to Illinois. Dad said, the next time I came up to see Aunt Mertha, I think you can go, Case. There's the old root cellar. He says, the next time I came, Mr. Jensen had gotten someone to put logs across the top of the walls, cover the logs with plywood sheathing, and lay sod over the top. Once the roof was on and the door fitted, Mertha would order a season's worth of potatoes, onions, and carrots to be stored in bags in the cool dampness. The bags sat on the dirt floor until under shelves of cans. There surely was a path worn between the kitchen and the root cellar. For the 75th anniversary of the clearing, the root cellar was renovated. I think Mike Schneider did this, and he did so many great things, but I really love that he did that to the root cellar. So if I were just to go back a little bit, I think, case for my, yep. So let's just talk about Mertha's genealogy. You might wonder whether this willful, smart, hardworking, conniving, compassionate, opinionated, passionate, hardworking, I said it twice on purpose, where she got that gusto from. So the Fulkersons, go on. This is the ancestry that we have of Aunt Mertha's dad, and it goes back to 1625. Christine Vignet was the matriarch of the family, and she was a Belgian Walloon. They had been sent, her family had been sent by the Dutch West Indies Trading Company to establish a stronghold on Manhattan Island. The Walloons were French-speaking Protestants from the southern Netherlands region. And so this is New Amsterdam, where they set up this trading company and established a town. The Vignes had 3 daughters, Christina, Maria, and Rachel, when they sailed to America. It is believed, I don't know if anyone is familiar with New York City, there's a road called Maiden Lane, and it's believed that the Maiden Lane was named after these 3 daughters. In 1625, the company sent over another ship with 103 head of cattle and offloaded them onto Manhattan Island. Along with the cattle came some home builders and more settlers who were directed to establish farms on Manhattan. We can presume that Dirk Fulkerson, which is where Fulkerson comes from, was one of these carpenters. He migrated from Norway and Holland to the New World in about 1629. So this is all of New Amsterdam was New York, and then parts of Connecticut and just that whole area is New Amsterdam, or New Netherlands. New Amsterdam is the city that is now New York City. This is where, that's where the Vigne house is. As you can see, Dirk's house was there. He eventually owned 500 acres, and then the English kind of kicked him out. So they spread in different directions. They went to New Jersey first. That's where our ancestors were, in Somerset, New Jersey. They were Quaker Friends families, so they were very connected in community with their church. And then they started to spread out to North Carolina and parts of Virginia. And the next slide, there's Dirk's house. And so this is interesting. See, that's Greenpoint? Do the next slide, Case. Dirk the Norseman was a bar that was located at that point on the map for a very, very long time. And then they decided that Dirk the Norseman was not a great name for a bar, so they changed it to Greenpoint. But that was in a nod to him. So that's the Fulkersons. Then we have the Zentses. The Zents, Mertha's mom was Bertha May Zentz, and they came 100 years later. They were actually in France, way on the eastern border of France, like right near Germany and, that little area in there. They came from the Netherlands, but that was just because they had traveled from France to Strasbourg to da-da, and eventually got on a ship to America. The ship was called, theirs was called the Thistle. They were packed with people, and many people died, including our Zents. So Anna Marie Geist showed up without a husband and with kids. And they settled first in Maryland, and then this is the progression of the Fulkersons and the Zents from being immigrants to eventually Door County. But they both of the families ended up in the same place in Indiana. This is Marshall County, Indiana. And then the next slide will show us that Tea Garden in La Paz, Edwin Fulkerson was in Tea Garden, and Bertha Zentz was in La Paz. And then they were married, and there they are. We have a lot of pictures of Grandma and Grandpa Zentz. The whole family, you'll see. They just love taking pictures of themselves, I guess, which we're glad of because they're fun. This is Aunt Mertha, right here. This is a Zentz family. We think it's the 50th anniversary of John and Bertha. So let's see. So anyway, Edwin and Bertha started a family in Indiana, and this is one of their farms in Indiana, in La Paz. This is just a great picture, isn't it? Oh man, that's a great picture. There's John Zentz. He lived to 83. This is their father, Edwin Fulkerson. He was a railroad man. It looks like Mertha. Yeah.
Looks like a Richardson.
No. These are all the Fulkerson girls, and I put this up here because I've never seen such a collection of terrible middle names in my life. Mertha's gravestone is Mertha E. Fulkerson, and I go, I wonder what the E stands for. Well, when you do this stuff, you go down the rabbit hole, and so probably an hour and a half later, I finally found Eudora. Are you kidding me? So no wonder she never used it. And so that was the order of the kids. Alice was kind of an afterthought, as you can see, a surprise, as we would say. So that's Grace and Mertha in front of the farm in La Paz, and Bertha. And then later on, so this is after a little out of order, but who cares? That's Mertha and Alta, the third sister, and that's my dad and my Aunt Ellis. So this is years later. I screwed that one up. And so it's Alta, Grace, and Mertha. Like I said, they like taking pictures of themselves. And then there's the four girls. There's after Alice had come along. Grandpa was a railroad man, which is why they went from La Paz to, eventually they moved to Anderson for 4 years. And then when, like I say, down the rabbit hole, big long story about unions and railroads and, all of that stuff. But they ended up in Highland Park. This would still be in Indiana, though. And here, this is the crew. You can see one thing about Mertha in these pictures as a kid. She was always laughing. The whole family was. They had a great time, except for Bertha. Grandma Grace liked to say that Bertha, she was the 9th child, and she was the baby, and she was spoiled, and so she was just kind of not quite as much fun as the rest of them. They're the girls again with a friend. So we've just got all these. Well, this is so I jumped. I told you this is Grandma writing out how Mertha and Mr. Jensen met, which I've already read. So, which is one. There's Mertha and Edwin and Bertha and Alta. Then something happened to Alta. She was murdered. And it's a bizarre story. She was, Aunt Mertha was already up in the clearing at this time. This was 1942. And Mertha was obviously working at the clearing. Grandpa had just retired, and him and Bertha went up to take a vacation and see Mertha. So they weren't at home. Alta never left the house. She was 75 pounds. She was... Grandma would never exactly say what it was, but she was just frail. She was frail and afraid of the world and diminutive. And there was a carnival in town, so Grandma and Grandpa were gone. Grandma Grace had moved down the street, got married, moved down the street, had kids, and the youngest kid, Roy, was still at home. He was 13. He wanted to go to the carnival. And so Alta took him to the carnival in town. Well, then Roy didn't want to go home. So Aunt Alta went home by herself. She got in bed, she got in her pajamas. This person that they're talking about came in the house, took her out of her bed, took her into the backyard, etc. There's children here. And she was not found until the next day. Well, obviously that completely crushed Grandpa because he cared about his daughters more than anything. And what I just find to be a little bit weird, you can go. I'm sorry that I'm not telling you. This is the story, 75-year-old woman, that's Alta. What I find to be weird about the story, not weird or whatever, or maybe it just talks about how stoic they were. There's nothing written by Mertha, by Grandma, by anybody about this incident. They have diaries, but this was just not written about, talked about, not even talked about. So it was definitely, I just wanted to bring that up as one of the challenges that Aunt Mertha faced, not only in starting the clearing, etc. Well, she was at this time, Jens was still there, but just all of the work, she did all of the work at the clearing, and then, to have something like that. So this is Edwin and Bertha shortly before he passed. And Grandma swears he died from a broken heart. So, then in this is a little earlier. This 1924, Grandma got married. Mertha was her flower girl, and I love this because it just shows how really, really short she is. In fact, this is we call this Grandma's shoe chair, or Aunt Mertha's shoe chair. She had it in Mertha's cabin. All the time that she was there. This was the chair that she sat on to tie her shoes because she couldn't reach them from a normal chair. Grandma's husband, Grandpa Richardson, and again, just illustrating the playfulness that Mertha had. She was a little pixie actually. So then we just have a series of pictures of Mertha and Dad. The cabin, etc. The dormitories. This is Mertha in Chicago. So after Jens died, she had to do a lot of hustling to keep the clearing going. And this was her going to a meeting to discuss if the clearing should be turned over to the Audubon Society. But fortunately, real good friends that lived across the street, Sid Telfer, that everybody knows his name. Sid Telfer was the one who said to Mertha, let's go talk to the Farm Bureau. And that's what saved it. So here's Mertha at her loom, teaching, weaving. This is a weaving of Aunt Mertha's. And actually the cloth that I have on the table with the projector is a weaving of Aunt Mertha's. It's funny to see when I was doing this to see so many pictures. There's so many pictures, and she was like a person that was like, I don't want my picture taken, so there's a lot. That's me. Since she didn't have kids, since she devoted her life to Jensen, we were her kiddies, with a D, kiddies. And like I say, we'd go up every summer and see her, and then she'd come every winter. And she was really, really fun. One story that I really like was she came down one year with a book of Mark Twain's collected stories, and she read us What Stumped the Blue Jay. And this was just a fantastical story about a blue jay that was trying to fill up a cabin with acorns. And when the other birds saw what he was doing, it was like he was like the laughing stock of the woods. And they brought people from all around, or birds from all around, to see what this crazy blue jay was trying to do. But it was the first time that I had heard Mark Twain, and I was just as enamored with him as Mertha was. She loved the satire and the wit. That's Bertha. Bertha came up quite a bit. After Edwin died, Bertha came up quite a bit. In fact, at some point, she was a cook for the clearing. She passed in 83. Oh, no, in 63. That's jalopy. Jalopy. Jalopy is the feminine form of jalopy. That was Aunt Mertha's trusty Model T. One time she said it broke. She said, I couldn't believe it. I didn't think it would ever break. And she tried to fix it herself. Someone came along, showed her where a hose came out. And so then, ever since then, before she started jalopy, she'd lift the hood and shove in the hose, and away she'd go. This is just one of the stories, through doing all of this research and collecting things. So much has been written. A lot of it is just repeating, the same story. She came for a year. She stayed forever. Jens died in 51. They were going to have to close the clearing. And in fact, before he died, he had appointed a board of directors, and Mertha was on the board of directors, and they all vowed nothing would ever happen to the clearing. And by the time that they finally got together to have a meeting, they were all of the attitude of, oh, we just have to close. Well, what can we do? We have to close it. And Aunt Mertha had written her resignation letter. She was like, this is too much. I can't do this. And she'd start to go into the hotel, and then she'd say, oh, I can't. She'd walk back out. She'd walk around the block. She'd go back in. And when she finally went into the meeting, she said, we all promised. And she took her resignation letter and she ripped it up. And she said, the gate to the clearing will never be closed again. So that's strong women doing hard things. You can tell she's getting tired. That's her seat in the dining room. And there's Emma Toft. We love the stories about, everyone loves the stories about they had oatmeal every day because it's good for you and cheap. Things like that. So then our family started coming up to Door County in 1960. Nancy, who's right here, was the littlest one. She was about 3 at the time. We went to Washington, that was Chambers Island. We first stayed at Will's Cottages. And, did Door County things that were available at the time. We saw Aunt Mertha often. And, did the ferry and stuff like that. We loved to go into the lodge, though, because we could go up and down the dumbwaiter. we could pump the pump. We could run around the rocks at the council ring. And then, like I say, at Christmas, she always came and stayed with us. With Bertha. And there we are at Emma Toft's with Emma's deers. When she was in Madison for the winters, we would go and visit. This must have been Easter because never would we be wearing legs and shoes, and so we must have gone for Easter. She'd be up in Madison preparing for the next year, and we would go visit. There's Dad on the property, right about where we donated a bench in his name. One of the things that, in going through all of these papers, one of the things that I came across was a letter that Emma Toft wrote Mertha. And the first part of the letter, she actually hand wrote out this whole long poem. And just the beginning of it, from the time of the first moon till the time of the last sun, it was given to my people, while the great giver of life made me out of the earth of this land. He said, you are the land and the land is you. I take good care of the land, for I am a part of it. And I tried to find when this was originally published. It's written, it's quoted a lot of places when people are making a case for Indian lands or rights or things like that. The keynotes are in Washington State, but I could not find where it originally came. But it must have been around that time, and obviously, made a huge impression on her. Here's Emma, and that's Roy Lukes, who was living in the Upper Range Lighthouse at the Ridges, and was also a very good friend of Mertha's. Obviously, there's not many people up here at that time, so they all had to be friends. But a real cute story is when I asked Charlotte Lukes, I said, Charlotte, do you know any good Aunt Mertha stories? And she said, her and Roy got married after Aunt Mertha had passed. But she did have a story that Roy really loved, and that was that after Mertha died, in January of 1971, during one of the worst snowstorms, worst snowy winters that they had, Emma was just beside herself that she had to get to Green Bay to Mertha's funeral. She had to get to Mertha's funeral. So Roy drove her to Green Bay, only to find out that the service had been canceled. But he was tickled by that. That he felt very honored that had occurred in that way. And this is Virginia Booth, another good friend of hers. She wrote, well, we'll see, she wrote, and I'm just talking about some of the people there. When you go looking through what historical information that we have, there are so many influential people that were wowed away by Aunt Mertha. Bill Kosakakis was the Farm Bureau manager, and he was like a huge supporter of her for a long time. George Anastopoulos, who was an instructor, he was the one that got the congressional record thing written. So again, back to this is the poem, and then what she wrote to Mertha was, "May I thank you for the privilege of being with you. This poem speaks to me. What wouldn't white men learn from his brother? I'm so happy and grateful the clearing has a cook, so you are fed. My love to you, Emma." And there they are. I just love it. There's a lot of stories now I'm working at the Ridges, there's a lot of stories at the Ridges about how these two would, supposedly lay down in front of bulldozers to stop them from tearing up the swales. So in 1969, Grandma bought this house in, preparing for Aunt Mertha to retire, and herself, actually, she bought this house on Bay Settlement Road. I do have these mixed up. This is the original picture of nothingness, because this was a farm, or this was a pasture land at one point. Nothingness. That the previous picture, you can see trees, and they all came about because the students at the clearing all bought trees for Mertha. and planted them. And Grandma names, she names all these trees. Like I say, 5 cedars, 2 maples, 3 crabs, 1 shaggy bark hickory, and they were donated by the clearing students. It was well wooded when we arrived, and under Mertha's instructions, I planted the rest. It was a joy to come after we moved in, even after Mertha passed in the winter of 1971. When I was planning to go back to Highland Park, us grandkids said, "Grandma, you weren't going to sell it," because we did love it. We did love being there. This is probably one of the last pictures going into the cabin. So she was only there for a year, and I did take Jack, my kid's dad, there once, and I tell you, she was so spicy. Her and Jack, like they bonded, but then they immediately got into this argument about who was the troubadour of America. Who do you think? Jack picked Bob Dylan. Aunt Mertha was adamant that the troubadour of America was Johnny Cash. And so this is Grandma and Mertha and Alice's husband Milo. There's some more of the plantings that they did. This is the last Christmas that Mertha was with us, and you can see how frail she was at this time. When she wrote a letter to, after this visit, she wrote a letter to Mom, and let's see if I have it written out. She said, "What a joy to be with you. Even with the empty chair for which your heart was aching, you managed to make Christmas a joyful one for both Grace and I. And I was worried about Grace this Christmas, as this year has been a hard one for her in many ways. Retirement has been the best thing for her. If I had only retired 1 year sooner, I would be of more value to the world for a longer period of time. But right now, retirement and the loss of Marcia, I didn't go into that, my sister, has knocked her for a loop. Right now, it is hard for her to see such things that are in greater hands than ours, and that Marcia can now do more for us than she did before. Her presence is felt very keenly when all is quiet. That is why I enjoyed sleeping in the big chair. She is thrilled with the new family room, and her presence was very close. She thinks that family room is a new period in your family life. I think so too. She said, I hope you can enjoy these winter days and that you will save some of your energy to enjoy the excitement of spring, which always follows. Saying thanks to everyone for making Christmas one long to be remembered, and a special thanks to Carol, my mom, because she really was the best hostess anyone ever knew. So I kind of skipped over that part. My sister was 16, and she had a stupid teenage accident on Halloween night, and passed in November. Then we had Christmas, and then Aunt Mertha passed. It was a dark time. So when I go back to talking about all of the people that gave her accolades and were her dear, dear, dear friends. People just loved her so much. This was the letter that Virginia Booth, who I think she was the president of the Friends of the Clearing at the time, she wrote this letter the next day, and in it, she gives us a picture of Mertha's last week. So they got home from Highland Park for Christmas. Then they went and they did a wedding, and then they did something else. And then Aunt Mertha wrote the letter the week of the 11th to my mom, and then she mailed it on her way out of town on the 19th to go see Virginia with Grandma, of course. And when they were visiting Virginia, she wanted, of course, to go see the clearing. And like I said, snowiest winter ever. And so they did not necessarily get out of the car, well, they just stepped out. But she talked about how her eyes were just twinkling to be at the clearing again. And I love how she says, it is a great sadness at my loss of such a good friend, but heartfelt gratitude that I had the opportunity to know her, for I realize that it has made a better person out of me, and I will have my life enriched forever. So that gives us a good picture of Aunt Mertha's last week, month of life, and I'm personally thrilled to know that she did get to go see the clearing one last time. Then she sat in her chair, and Grandma went to get her for lunch, and she was gone. She kind of fibs when she says that that's the reason that she slept in the big chair, and it was really because of angina. So it was heart. That was her grave, by the way, and next to Alta's, and Alta's there, and Edwin and Bertha are there. So that was the end of Aunt Mertha. And then, and then came the accolades, and then came the articles, and I love this one when she accepted she was given this award when she accepted the award. I would not have come to the clearing in the first place if I did not think that nature, untouched by man, has a power to make us aware of our basic needs and help us in our groping for infinity. And so here we are. I don't know why these are jumping, but anyway, it doesn't matter. This is Bay Settlement, so this is why they loved it, was because it was on the bluff overlooking the bay. And we, like I say, we were there a lot. Sarah, you love your haircut?
We were a good-looking crew.
And there's my Megan. And again, so when Ada Corson, Aunt Mertha had started writing a book, and she had a diary. It was just actually not really a diary. It was just like a note. Here's what I did today, kind of a thing. And she had started writing a book, and so Ada Corson came and she finished the book and published the book. It's called The Story of the Clearing. And then because of that, her and Aunt Mertha were cited for this award, this certification of recognition by the Farm Bureau. So that's just an example of all of the things that came after. There's Grandma Grace. We still got her up to the clearing as often as we could. And she loved it, and she was a royalty there for all of her years, because she had been there changing beds, cleaning, cooking, a lot. This is the mural that's in the clearing of Aunt Mertha, and you don't see I don't know why we were getting these lines, but the spinning wheel was Mertha's, and it was one of the only things that she took with her when she retired to Bay Settlement Road. And then and Grandma had it. Grandma was still at Bay Settlement for another 10 years. And then when Grandma moved, the spinning wheel came down to Dad's house. Then Dad moved to New Mexico, and the spinning wheel went. And then I brought the spinning wheel back to Ellison Bay, and then I had it in the house. And I finally just said, this really belongs at the clearing. So her original spinning wheel is now sitting up there next to her mural. So, and I think that's kind of it, huh?